You're listening to Wake Up with Patti Catter, where we're overcoming trials with triumphs. Now, here's your host, Patti Catter.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning again this week. Today I have Patrick Fitzgibbons on the show. Patrick retired from a police department in Colorado, which he's going to tell you his story in a little while. And he was in the 82nd Airborne. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Patti. I appreciate being here. Excited to have a chat with you and your listeners.
Thank you. Go ahead and let's jump right in. Tell our listeners a little bit about where you're from. We'll start there, where you're from, and a little bit about how you grew up.
Well, again, Pat Fitzgibbons, thank you for listening to the show. I really do appreciate it. I grew up in Colorado, mostly. I was a military brat, traveled around. My dad was he was a judge advocate. He was a lawyer in the military, in the Army when I was growing up. So we lived in Europe for a little bit until I was about 10, moved to Colorado, or moved to Colorado. My dad was stationed there and pretty much stayed in Colorado my entire life. And then I went into the military. I went down to Fort Bragg and 82nd and spent time down there. And then I knew when I was in the military that I have a lot of cops that are relatives, used to be cops. Now they're all retired, but they're Chicago cops. So that was in my blood. And so I knew I wanted to continue serving in some capacity outside of the military. My wife at the time didn't like the military very much because I was in a rapid deployment unit and I was always gone. And by then we had a child, my daughter. And so she wanted me out of the military. So I thought it was the best thing to do if I wanted to keep my wife and my kid.
Yeah.
So I got out of the military, but I knew I wanted to serve, continue to serve. And I really had this passion, this bug to become a law enforcement officer, a police officer. And I did it, moved back to Colorado, got into the police academy, paid for it myself. At the same time, I got a 2-year degree. And, I was really lucky, Patti, because I got the first job that I applied to, which was in southeastern Colorado. Spent about 10 years there. While I was in southeastern Colorado, I finished up a master's degree, and then I got kind of recruited. I did get recruited to the private sector in corporate security. Didn't like that because I was traveling too much and I had a young family. So I got back into law enforcement, and I retired in 2019 from an agency just outside of Boulder, Colorado, which is not very far from Denver. And again, 23 years, I retired as an operations commander. I was in charge of all the patrol division and patrol officers and just had a great career. I mean, ups and downs, like you probably know. I know you have military and law enforcement in your family, and it's ups and downs, but I retired on top. I teach at the college level in Colorado, do a bunch of stuff like that. Of course, I have my show that we can talk about. But yeah, I'm just having a great life. My kids are adults, they're self-sufficient and on their own. And I'm just happy to be here. Happy to be on this show and tell more about my story.
Yeah, I actually want to give you a question that I'm sure some of my listeners are wondering too. What's one of the hardest things that you had to deal with as a police officer? Because it's different, I think, now than it was when you were in. I know I look back at the time when Ken, my husband, was in the military or in the law enforcement, and it's so much different now. I mean, you have so many obstacles that our law enforcement's going through. But can you think of one thing that was really difficult or crazy, a crazy story for us? I like crazy cop stories.
Well, I think, it's ups and downs. Like I said, law enforcement. I think one of the hardest calls I ever went on was the death of a child. Got run over by a school bus. Mom was calling the child across the street. The initial call that came out, said that, the kid just grazed the bus. He was fine. But when I got there, the kid was deceased. The child was deceased. So calls and I can just go on and on about calls like that. And they're not all doom and gloom, but that was one that still sticks out in my mind as a very, very difficult call. I mean, I had small children at the time, so it hit home, very closely. And your listeners who are law enforcement, you could probably relate to it. You have, again, service in your background. So it was a very difficult time, to deal with that. But then there are funny stories in law enforcement. It's the greatest show on earth. I always tell people it's not Groundhog Day. I mean, it's like I said, it's so fun. But it does, it is taxing mentally and physically on the individual. And you mentioned, it's so difficult today. I couldn't imagine being a law enforcement officer today. Thank God if there's brave men and women that still want to get into the profession. not in the numbers that I'd seen when I first became an officer, but it is a very difficult environment right now. That's an understatement. I mean, just turn on the news. But I thank God every day that there's brave men and women out there that serve and protect us, and they're not perfect. You know, they're not perfect. They make mistakes, but the overwhelming majority of people who serve and the first responders, and what I mean by first responders, not just cops. I'm talking about EMS, fire, paramedics, dispatchers. You know, they're good people. They're just trying to do a good job and serve, and it's very difficult.
Right. I honestly have never met a police officer who was in it just to get by or for a paycheck, because your pay is not very great as a police officer. Yeah. Those of you serving know. And a lot of times you kind of hear glorified police stories, right? So you think of Miami Vice, or you think of what's that, Jump Street 21?
21 Jump Street.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So, you think of all these cool TV shows.
Yeah. I mean, most, you think about it. I mean, a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people get what they know about law enforcement in particular, about shows that we do. And they're funny and they're entertainment, but they're not real life. They're obviously Hollywood. But yeah, most people get what they know about cops from Law and Order and CSI, however many CSIs there are, other shows out there. So that's kind of the image that they have about law enforcement. And in reality, it's not anything like that. Some of it is kind of accurate, but most of it isn't.
Right. I remember when I was a kid, we would play cops and robbers all the time. And it was something that we thought was really cool. Like police officers were really cool because they were going to protect us from the bad guy. Yeah. And nowadays I feel like the media has really spun too much dark side of police officers, when in fact the majority, like you said, are overwhelmingly protective of the people in their communities, and they want to help. And we don't hear those stories as much as we should. So tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Thank you. And I agree with that. But I think the vast majority of Americans, maybe I'm just naive, they support law enforcement. But we live in a unique time right now, Patti, where it's so hard. You can't, depending on where you're at in the country, it might be difficult to support law enforcement. But I tell people on my show, and I go on a lot of shows, that I really do believe that the vast majority of people do support our brave men and women who protect us every day. And my show, it's called CJ Evolution, Criminal Justice Evolution Podcast. And I started it about 6.5 years ago. I remember I was kind of driving around one day on patrol, and I was listening to Rogan or something like that. And I was like, man, it would be fun to start a show that was, just dedicated to law enforcement and criminal justice. At the time, now there's tons of them. At the time, there wasn't a lot of shows out there like that. So I did it. And it was trial and error. And I don't know if you do it with your shows, but I go back sometimes and listen to some of his first shows, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yes, I'm still doing that.
And I tell people, I'm not an expert. I'm constantly evolving. I'm constantly improving and stuff like that. But my show, and I've been blessed, I have like 480 shows, and I've had people that have been in prison. I have had people who are best-selling authors. I've had some Navy SEAL guys that help hunt down bin Laden. I've had just a vast majority of guests on the show. And I'm not saying that in an arrogant way. I'm just saying that I've had a lot of people on there, and I just don't sit around, Pat, and talk about war stories. I just don't do that. It's a criminal justice show. We talk about some topics, but the premise behind my show is I wanted it to be something positive. I wanted it to be uplifting and motivational, instead of just, there's a time and a place for war stories. I get that. But I just didn't want it to be kind of a depressing show where it's just doom and gloom, because cops and first responders, they see enough of that on a daily basis. So I wanted to put a spin on it and have much more of a positive and uplifting message. And I've been able to do that. And I love the show. It's a passion of mine, and it's going really well. So thank you for asking about it.
Would you say that the majority of your listeners are law enforcement, or do you have an array of people listening?
Yeah, the most of them are first responders. They're not just cops, but, fire and EMS and paramedics. But a lot of them are police officers. But, I have military too, because I've had military, people on before. So I have a segment that's military, and then the majority of segments or the demographic is law enforcement and military.
Mm-hmm. What do your kids think of you? Because they're older now, so they grew up with their dad being a police officer, right?
Yeah. They, they're proud of me, and I love my kids. I'm very close to them. But, there were some difficult times. I mean, I was one of those cops as a young cop where I was signing up for all the overtime and everything. And I missed a lot of my kids when they were growing up, because I was working to provide, and that's just what people do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they're very proud of me. But it was kind of tough sometimes, especially my daughter, big cop, and always scared to bring people home. But my kids, I love my kids. I'm very close to them. But yeah, it's a difficult life, for a first responder family. And I'm not saying just because you're not a first responder, it's not difficult. But I was really kind of a stickler with certain things, not like locking the doors and stuff like that. But my kids are very proud of me now, and we have a great relationship.
That's awesome. I can kind of relate because I remember when I was younger and I brought my husband to meet my dad for the first time. And my dad, he just did, he was a volunteer on the sheriff's department at the time, but he was very, very pro law enforcement and was best friends with his father-in-law, who was my grandpa, who was a retired Flint police officer. But my dad, he loved guns. And so in the basement of their house, because we lived in Michigan, everybody has a basement there, we had a lot of guns. Like he had gun cabinets, gun safes, tons and tons of guns. And he asked my husband the very first time he met him, within like 5 minutes, he says, "Hey, you want to go downstairs and take a peek at my guns?" And I was like, oh no, this is going bad. But my husband just got out of the Marine Corps, and my husband was like, yeah, let's go, man. Let's go.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So they hit it off right then, but I can definitely relate. I know there's times, my daughter, she wants us to meet a boy or something. And I say, does he know who your background is?
Yeah.
Where you
and that's
came
good.
from?
It's good. It's good to tell them that. And I did the kind of the thing that you see sometimes on shows and stuff. I actually was cleaning a gun when I wasn't doing that I was just happened to be cleaning my service weapon. She brought a guy home. She was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it happens. I mean,
got
it's
to put a
just
little bit of
normal.
fear in, it is normal.
And you can kind of test the way that child, whoever they're bringing home, how they respond too, like either, wow, this is neat, or, ooh, maybe I better get out of here while I can, because I'm a bad person. Oh man. So your wife sounds like, she must have put up with a lot from you too then, because you being military, and like you said, she was saying like, okay, time for you to get out. But did she realize you were going to get out of the military to jump right into law enforcement, which is
she
equally...
did. My ex-wife, and she's, God bless her, she's a wonderful woman. And I knew, I told her obviously my path. And it was different. It's always been a dangerous job, but it was different, a little bit different back then. It was, again, it was always been dangerous. It always will be, but it was just a different environment. But she was very supportive of me, Patti. And that's, if you don't have the support of your family, least of all your spouse or partner, it's going to make it that much more difficult. So, but she supported me throughout the majority of my law enforcement career, which was very important.
Mm-hmm, it is. So I'm going to ask you a question I normally don't ask my guests, but I think I'm going to start because I just felt compelled to. But what would you say, with all of the turmoil going on in America right now, if you could relay one message to all Americans, what would that be? I'm putting you on the spot right now.
What would that be? Is I would say that we need to learn how to communicate better. I think communication is the key to most everything, whether it's law enforcement, relationship, husband, wife, partner, whatever, is that we need to learn how to communicate better and more effectively. All the stuff that's going on. And again, I'm not some expert. I'm not trying to project myself as some expert, but I think it all centers around communication. And it seems like we have a lack of communication, or not very clear communication in this country. And there's so many other things that I would say too, but I think communication is key to everything. It's the key to, a successful relationship, successful negotiations between countries and, politicians. So better communication, I think, would be the thing that I would stick with.
Right. I think that's a really great point, because you as a police officer, when you're communicating to somebody you're about to arrest, and then the person you're about to arrest, they need to communicate better with you too, instead of put their guard up and act like a big punk. They should just relax a little bit.
Exactly. It all starts with communication. We're doing it right now. Your husband, it all starts with good and effective communication. And I think with so many distractions that we have going on in the world right now, social media and all this other stuff, I'm not saying that that's bad. It can be bad, but I think we get lost with our communication. I mean, how many times, I mean, I remember before I retired, you sitting next to a person in a different office and we're sending emails to each other when we could just pick up and kind of walk and talk face to face. So I'm not knocking technology. I think technology is very important in today's world. You need it, but I think we need to communicate more and better as we move forward.
I love that so much. Love it. So I want to bring up your book. You have a book. Tell us about that.
So I wrote, it's called Evolve, and it's a micro book. And for those listeners out there who don't know what a micro book is, it's just like the name implies. It's a small book. It's about 80 pages, easily digestible. And I wanted to write it. My dad passed away in 2019. So I wanted to write it dedicated to him, which I did. But I also wanted to give some suggestions and feedback and advice to the up and coming first responders. And so Evolve is an acronym, and it stands for first E. That first E is elevate your mindset. It all starts with your mindset. Look, I mean, that's what I believe. I think everything starts in your mind. If we think bad thoughts, if we think life sucks, I hope I can say that, or whatever, then that's what you're probably going to get in return. So elevate, I believe, is the first step. And it's not that I don't have bad days or anybody else has bad days, but if you constantly stay in that mindset, that's what life's going to give you. So V is evolve. Sorry. So evolve. Oh my God, you're putting me on the spot. Visualization. So visualization is key to everything. So, if you look at like sport, let's take Tiger Woods, for instance. So if you take Tiger Woods, most of the time in his heyday, he would say, I visualized this moment. I visualized being up on the podium, getting that green jacket at the Masters. Same with the Olympics right now. If you see some of the people who have won gold medals, a lot of them say, I visualize this moment. So I really am a believer in visualization, that you can visualize, and you have to put hard work behind that. You have to put action behind that. But what you visualize, you can achieve. What you visualize, you can achieve. So the O is others. And I'm really a big believer in who you surround yourself with. If you surround yourself with crappy people or bad influences, that's pretty much who you're going to become. Remember, I mean, you're a mother, Patti. Remember, you probably told your kids at one point, don't hang out with us kids. Well, because why? Because who you hang out with, you're probably going to become. Mm-hmm. So others is very important. Jim Rohn, if you know who that is, and your listeners know, he had a late great saying, you're the five, and it's stood the test of time. You're the average of the five people you associate with. So I'm a big believer in, others who you surround yourself with. As a matter of fact, one of the things, and I think law enforcement, maybe they, and it's not, what I'm about to say is not a knock on law enforcement or first responders, but the best thing I ever did, Patti, was get friends outside of law enforcement.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Because law enforcement is an inherent toxic environment. That's just, I'm not saying anything bad, but it is. Any cop who's been doing the job for a period of time will probably tell you the same thing. It's just people don't call us when everything's going good. People call us when what hits the fan, and that eventually is going to rub off on you. Mm-hmm. So L, love yourself. If it all starts with you, and I'm not talking about it in a narcissistic, egotistical kind of way, but if you don't love yourself first, how are you going to love and care for anybody else? I mean, taking care of yourself mentally, physically, things like that. We all go through dark periods in life, roadblocks, or if you want to call them. I know I have. But you have to learn to love yourself, because it all starts with, if you're not happy with yourself, again, how are you going to serve and how are you going to be there for others? And I think so many people out there are just miserable. Just their life sucks for whatever reason. And I'm not trying to discount that, but it really needs to come back to taking care of yourself.
Yeah, true.
If you don't take care of yourself, Patti, you're going to be there for your kids.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not, or you will be, but probably not the way you should be.
Right.
So that's O. Again, and V is victory. Celebrate those victories every day. I start every day, Patti, getting up and just being in a state of gratitude. I went through some rough times in the last year, but I learned to practice gratitude again and again with action. Hey, I'm alive. So celebrate those victories, because people do have them every day. I know we tend to focus on the negative, but you do have positives. So celebrate those victories every day because you have them. No matter how bad you think your life is, somebody always has it worse, always has it worse. So celebrate those, be grateful. That's the V, the victories, and E, every day be your best, show up, do the best job you can. So I wrote that book, again, as a micro book. People can find it on my website. You can download it for free. And I wanted to dedicate it to my father. I wanted to give some tips and advice for law enforcement officers, because everything we just talked about, people might say, well, it has nothing to do with law. It has everything to do with law enforcement. It has everything to do with any profession, and it's a lot of, it's self-help, basically. Stuff that I wish I had when I was a young cop. That I did.
Right. I can see it being utilized in all different things, like you were saying, police, everything. Military, stay-at-home moms.
Yeah, but being my background, from where I came, military law enforcement, I felt compelled and, wanted to continue to give back.
I love it. And where can they find your book, your website, and your social media?
Everything is on cjevolution.com. Again, criminaljusticeevolution.com. If you Google my name, Pat Fitzgibbons, you'll see all my stuff come up. But if you just go to the website, all my social media is linked up. You can see all my episodes. You can see the book. Again, it's free. You can download the PDF version. And if you want to contact me, reach out to me. I love hearing from people.
Awesome. Do you ever do speaking engagements in person?
Absolutely. I just did a speaking engagement. Great question. I did a speaking engagement about a month ago. What are we in right now? February. So it was like the mid-January. I did a speaking engagement for the undersheriffs of Colorado. Told them a little bit more in depth about my story, but it was a positive story about exactly what we're talking about: resiliency, leadership, motivation, and stuff like that. But the long answer is yes. The short answer is I do speaking engagements a lot.
That's awesome. I was hoping so, because I think that you would be fantastic at it. So,
thank you. Yeah. I appreciate it. Yeah. I stumbled a little bit when you were putting me on the spot with the book. I was like, oh my God, what? But yeah, I do. I love speaking and I love getting in front of people, Patti. And I know there's an inherent fear of getting in front of people. And I'm not saying I don't get nervous and stuff like that, but I love getting in front of people and just talking and telling my story in hopes that it helps somebody else. I love it.
I like it too. You know what? I just wrote a little bit about that on my Facebook today, about the importance of sharing your story and how it can help so many people, and it helps yourself heal in the process of different things that you've been through. Yeah. Exactly.
And everybody, the one thing I learned, I learned it later in life, but everybody is going through something. Mm-hmm. Everybody is going through something. You probably don't know it majority of the time, but everybody has their story. Everybody is going through their personal tragedies or whatever. So the point in that is try to be nice to people, because the guy who cut you off, he might have been but you don't know what he's going through. You don't know what she's going through. They don't know what you're going through. So, just try to be nice to people.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. So true. Okay. Share your social media one more time.
It's cjevolution.com. That's criminaljusticeevolution.com, CJ Evolution for short. And you can find my website right there. It's a top-rated show. Everything that we talked about, speaking engagements, coaching, things like that, because I do coaching for first responders. It's all on the website, social media, LinkedIn. I'm big on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those are on the site.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick, for your service to our country and to your community, and for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Patti. You're doing a great job. You're killing it. And thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for all your family members that serve and protect and served and protect. And I appreciate you for having me on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Until next week, I am Patti Catter. I'll always be Patti Catter. I don't know why I end with that, right? Have an amazing week, everybody.
Thank you for listening. Please head over to patticatter.com for the latest updates on Patti, her talk show, and what she's up to. You can also find her on Amazon TV and Roku, and on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter @Patti Catter. Until next time.